The deafening roar of the Navy helicopter drowned out their laughter as it descended through the storm clouds. Rain lashed against my face, but I didn't flinch. Not anymore. The same people who had called me prison reject and damaged goods now stood behind me, their mouths hanging open as the rescue chopper hovered above our sinking vessel. The pilot's voice crackled through my radio, "Lieutenant Commander Jackson, we need your expertise. You're the only one who can get these people to safety." I turned to face my former tormentors, a calm smile spreading across my face. Sometimes, redemption arrives when you least expect it, and sometimes, it comes with a spotlight from above, illuminating the truth for everyone to see. If you've ever felt underestimated or pushed aside because of your past, hit that like button right now. And make sure you subscribe to catch more stories of unexpected triumph and second chances that remind us all why we should never judge someone's future by their history. I wasn't always the man they called for impossible rescues. 8 years ago, I was just Marcus Jackson, dishonorable discharge hanging around my neck like an anchor, trying to rebuild a life that had shattered during my final deployment. The military psychiatrist had written PTSD with violent tendencies on my file after I'd punched a superior officer during a flashback. What the report didn't mention was that the superior officer had been screaming in my face, triggering memories of the ambush that had killed half my unit. My first job interview after discharge was at Coastal Maritime Security, a private firm that handled everything from port security to emergency response along the eastern seaboard. The interviewer, a balding man named Richard Keller, glanced at my application and then stared at me like I was something he'd found stuck to his shoe. "We don't hire prison rejects," he said, tossing my resume across the desk. "I've never been to prison, sir," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the heat rising in my chest. "Military prison, civilian prison, same difference. Says here you attacked an officer." He leaned back in his chair. "We need stable people, Jackson. People who can follow orders without snapping." I wanted to explain. About the nightmares. About how I'd spent the last year in therapy, learning to manage my triggers. About how I'd been the best rescue swimmer in my unit before everything fell apart. Instead, I just nodded, gathered my papers, and left. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed in my sister's spare room, staring at the wall. Melissa had taken me in after the discharge, no questions asked. Her husband Dave wasn't thrilled about it, but he kept his complaints to whispers I could still hear through the thin walls. "How long is he staying, Mel? The kids are scared of him." "They're not scared of him. They're just not used to him yet. He stares into space. He wakes up screaming. That's not normal. He saved 19 lives during his service, Dave. 19. He deserves a chance to save his own." I pressed my palms against my eyes until I saw stars. 19 lives. And now I couldn't even save my own. The next morning, I was folding laundry when Melissa burst through the front door, waving a newspaper. "There's a job fair at the community center," she said, thrusting the paper at me. "The Coast Guard Auxiliary is going to be there. It's not military, but it's close. You could volunteer, get your foot in the door somewhere." I took the paper without much hope. "They'll run my name, Mel. No one wants damaged goods." She grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at her. "You're not damaged goods. You're my brother. You're a hero who's having a rough time. There's a difference." The job fair was crowded, noisy, and exactly the kind of environment my therapist had warned me to ease into gradually. I was about to leave when I spotted a small booth in the corner with a weathered sign, "Eastern Shore Rescue and Response." A gray-haired woman sat behind it, reading a paperback. "Not much interest?" I asked, approaching cautiously. She looked up, assessing me with sharp blue eyes. "We're not as glamorous as the Coast Guard. We handle the small stuff, stranded boaters, minor medical emergencies on the water, search parties for lost hikers. Volunteer basis, small stipend for gas. I have experience with water rescues, I said. Military. Which branch? I hesitated. Navy. Rescue swimmer. But I had a complicated discharge. She closed her book. I'm Eleanor Reeves. 27 years Navy Nurse Corps before I retired. I've seen complicated. What can you do? Ma'am? What skills do you have that would help my organization? I straightened my shoulders. Advanced water rescue techniques. Emergency medical training. I can navigate in zero visibility conditions. I can swim for hours if needed. I can. Can you follow civilian protocols? Can you take direction from people who might not have your training but know the local waters better than you do? Yes, ma'am. She handed me a form. We meet Tuesdays and Thursdays for training. First response call is this Saturday. Don't be late. That was how it started. Twice a week, I trained with a ragtag group of former military, retired first responders, and local fishermen who knew every hidden current and sandbar along 50 miles of coastline. Eleanor, just call me Elle, ran the operation with military precision but civilian flexibility. She never asked about my discharge, but sometimes I caught her watching me when we practiced high-stress scenarios, gauging my reactions. The first few months were hard. I kept to myself, did the work, and went home. Some of the other volunteers tried to include me in their post-training beers, but I always declined. The nightmares were still too frequent, the flashbacks too unpredictable. I couldn't risk it. Then came the storm that changed everything. It was supposed to be a routine call, a family of 4 stranded on a sandbar as the tide rose. But by the time our response boat reached them, the storm had intensified from moderate to severe. 8-foot waves crashed over the sandbar, and the family had climbed onto the roof of their small cabin cruiser. "We can't get any closer," shouted Mac, our boat operator, as we pitched in the churning water. "Current's too strong." I looked at the family, 2 terrified parents and 2 small children clinging to them. The boat was already starting to break apart under the pounding waves. "I'm going in," I said, already stripping down to my wetsuit. "Jackson, no." Elle grabbed my arm. "Protocol says we wait for Coast Guard backup in these conditions. Those kids won't last that long." I pulled away gently. "This is what I was trained for, Elle, trust me." Before she could object further, I was in the water, fighting the current that tried to slam me into the rocks. The cold shocked my system into hyper-focus, washing away everything except the mission. Stroke by stroke, I made my way to the stranded boat. The father saw me coming and shouted something I couldn't hear over the wind. I signaled for him to lower the smallest child, a girl no more than 4, into my arms. He hesitated, looking at the churning water between us. "I won't drop her," I shouted. "I promise." Something in my face must have convinced him. He whispered to his daughter, then carefully lowered her toward me. I secured her against my chest with one arm, using my free arm and legs to keep us afloat. "Hold tight, sweetheart," I murmured. "We're going for a little swim." The journey back to our rescue boat was the longest 100 yards of my life. Every wave threatened to tear the child from my grasp. Every current tried to pull us under. But I kept going, one stroke at a time, until Mac and Elle were pulling us aboard. I didn't wait to catch my breath. As soon as the little girl was safe, I was back in the water, fighting my way to the stranded family. 3 more trips, the second child, the mother, and finally the father, each one harder than the last as my strength ebbed. By the time we got the father aboard, my muscles were screaming and my lungs burning. "You crazy son of a bitch," Mac said as he helped me collapse onto the deck. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Elle wrapped a thermal blanket around my shoulders. "That was also completely against protocol," she said, but there was no anger in her voice. Good work, Jackson. Word of the rescue spread quickly through our small coastal community. The local paper ran a story, "Volunteer braves storm to save family of 4." They didn't use my name, I'd asked Elle not to share it, but people in the rescue community knew. Suddenly, I wasn't just the quiet guy who kept to himself during training. I was someone they wanted to know. Slowly, cautiously, I began to let people in. A beer after training with Mac and some of the others. Sunday dinner at Elle's house with her husband and grown children. Small steps toward a normal life. 6 months after joining Eastern Shore Rescue, I applied for a paid position with the Harbor Patrol. The interview was at the same building where I'd been rejected by Coastal Maritime Security, and as luck would have it, Richard Keller was on the interview panel. His eyes widened when I walked in. "Jackson? What are you doing here?" "Applying for the Harbor Patrol position, sir." He glanced down at my updated resume. "I see you've been with Eastern Shore Rescue. Eleanor Reeves runs that outfit, doesn't she?" "Yes, sir. She's my supervisor." The other interviewer, a woman I didn't recognize, leaned forward. "You're the one who rescued that family during the March storm, aren't you?" "Eleanor told me about that." Keller's expression shifted. "That was you?" I nodded, uncomfortable with the attention. The interview proceeded, with Keller growing increasingly quiet as his colleague asked me detailed questions about my rescue experience. When it was over, he followed me into the hallway. "Look, Jackson, about our previous meeting." "It's fine, sir. You were doing your job." "No, I was being a judgmental ass." He ran a hand over his balding head. "The Harbor Patrol position is yours if you want it, but I'd like to offer you something else. Coastal Maritime is expanding our emergency response division. We need someone with your skills." I studied him, searching for the catch. "Someone with my background?" "Someone with your courage," he corrected. "The past is the past. I'm interested in what you can do now." I took the job with Coastal Maritime. The pay was better, and the work more challenging. Over the next 2 years, I moved up from emergency responder to team leader to regional coordinator. My nightmares didn't disappear, but they became less frequent. I learned to recognize my triggers and manage them before they managed me. And then came the day of the cruise ship disaster. It was supposed to be a routine coastal cruise, a 3-day journey up the eastern seaboard with stops at scenic harbors. But at 2 a.m. on the second night, with the ship 30 miles offshore, an engine room fire quickly spread to the lower decks. By the time the Mayday call went out, smoke was filling the passenger cabins and the ship was losing power. I was asleep when my emergency phone rang. 20 minutes later, I was at the Coastal Maritime Command Center, where Richard was coordinating with the Coast Guard. "It's bad, Jackson," he said, his face grim. 2,000 passengers, fire spreading fast. Coast Guard's dispatching helicopters, but they're at least 40 minutes out. We're the closest response team. What assets do we have? 2 fast response vessels already en route. ETA 30 minutes. But they can only take 100 passengers each. I studied the ship schematics on the screen. The cruise line has evacuation protocols. They'll be loading the lifeboats. That's the problem. The fire damaged the launching mechanisms on the port side. Half the lifeboats are unusable. I did the math quickly. So even with lifeboats and our vessels, we're still short capacity for over 1,000 people. Richard nodded grimly. Coast Guard's calling in every available asset, but it's going to take time. We need someone on that ship helping coordinate the evacuation, prioritizing passengers, making sure no one gets left behind. "I'll go," I said immediately. "It's beyond dangerous, Marcus. That ship could go down before reinforcements arrive. All the more reason to have someone there who knows what they're doing." I was already heading for the door. "Have the pilot drop me on the upper deck. I'll coordinate from there." The flight to the cruise ship was a blur of preparation. I reviewed evacuation protocols, memorized deck layouts, and tried not to think about what awaited me. As our helicopter approached, the scale of the disaster became clear. Smoke billowed from the lower decks, and I could see passengers crowded on the upper levels, many without life jackets. "Can't get any closer," the pilot shouted over the headset. "Smoke's too thick." "Hover as steady as you can," I replied, securing my rescue harness. "I'm going down." The descent from the helicopter to the ship's deck was like dropping into chaos. Passengers screamed and pushed, desperate to reach the remaining lifeboats. Crew members tried to maintain order, but fear was winning. I unhooked from the harness and grabbed the nearest crew member, a young woman in a now soiled white uniform. "Who's in charge?" I shouted over the noise. "The captain's coordinating from the bridge," she replied, her voice shaking. "But communications are down in some sections." "Take me to him." The bridge was an island of relative calm in the storm of panic. Captain Reginald Torres stood at the center, issuing orders with the steady authority of a man who had prepared for this moment his entire career. "Coastal Maritime Emergency Response," I said, approaching him. "Marcus Jackson. I'm here to help coordinate the evacuation." He assessed me quickly. "We've got 8 functional lifeboats, each with capacity for 70. That's 560 passengers. Your vessels can take another 200. We still have over 1,000 people with nowhere to go. Coast Guard helicopters are inbound, but they're at least 20 minutes out. We need to prioritize and buy time." Together, we developed a plan. Children, elderly, and those with medical conditions would go in the lifeboats. The next priority group would board the coastal maritime vessels. Everyone else would move to the forward sections of the upper decks, away from the spreading fire, and wait for helicopter evacuation. "I need a team to help me organize the waiting passengers," I told the captain. "People who can keep calm and follow instructions." He assigned me 4 crew members, and we headed to the main pool deck, where hundreds of passengers had gathered. Some were crying, others praying, many just staring in shock. I climbed onto a table to address them. "My name is Marcus Jackson, Coastal Maritime Emergency Response. I need everyone to listen carefully. Help is coming, but we need to stay organized." A man in expensive pajamas pushed forward. "We've been waiting for an hour. The ship is burning beneath us." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "Yes, it is," I acknowledged. "And panic won't put out the fire or bring help faster. What will help is following instructions so that when rescue arrives, we can get everyone off quickly and safely." Something in my tone, the calm certainty perhaps, quieted the crowd. "We're going to divide into groups," I continued. "When the helicopters arrive, they'll take 20 people at a time. I need everyone to count off by 20s and stay with your group." As I organized the passengers, I kept one eye on the spreading fire. The ship was listing slightly to port, and the smoke was getting thicker. We were running out of time. The first Coast Guard helicopter arrived just as the deck beneath us began to heat up. The pilot's voice crackled through my radio, "Coastal Maritime, this is Coast Guard Rescue. We can take 20, but we need to be quick. This smoke is making approach difficult." "Copy that," I replied. "We're ready with the first group." The helicopter hovered above us, lowering a rescue basket. One by one, we loaded passengers, sending them up to safety. As the helicopter departed with its human cargo, I checked my watch. At this rate, it would take hours to evacuate everyone, hours we didn't have. That's when I spotted the Navy